Welcome back, everyone. We have one of my favorite bass players. We got Rob from Epica. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me here.
It's great to have you finally after so long, man. I've been trying to do this forever with you.
Yeah. I guess you're also pretty much a busy bee, so makes sense.
Right? Well, let's
Yeah.
get into this. You joined Epica in 2012. Your first record was the Quantum Enigma. How has the writing and recording process from that record changed to this record?
Oh, a lot to be honest. I mean, back in the days, it was more like actually when I joined, the band was still working with a different producer, also with a different studio. And when I joined, we eventually switched to Stanley Recording Facilities, which is based in here in the Netherlands.
Mhm.
And we also changed the producer, who's now Joost van der Broek. He's a good dear friend of mine. I've been working with him for 25 years already. Yeah, it's been a while. We know each other from like a former band, like back in the past. And well, actually, even back then, we were still everybody was like recording, and well, let's go to the writing first. Like everybody was writing their pieces at home. Eventually, everybody that's how we work. We throw all the ideas on one big pile, and
Dang.
then let's pick out the best ideas and work on that together. And yeah, we're dealing with the luxury problem that most of us don't live in Holland. Just like maybe a couple of band members live here.
Yeah.
Mark lives in Sicily, for instance. Simone lives in Germany. Isaac lives in Belgium. So it's not easy to get together.
Yeah.
So back in the days, I mean, there was a little bit more of a distance if it comes to writing together. Also, recording wise, we mostly did everybody did their own pieces, like separated, of course, like most metal bands do that.
Yeah.
But for this album, we chose like, okay, we want to, we want to work on the whole team vibe. We want to make this whole album to be like really like a team effort, and we want this album to sound as organic as possible. So we chose to actually write the whole album together. We this time, this is the first time that we really worked with actual writing camps. So we rented this old farm in the middle of nowhere. We got together like three times a week, and then we really worked as a solid team together. Like if I would come up with an idea and I wanted to test out like a new idea and ask Simone like, hey, please come over and try something with the vocals, that it was actually possible. And you can actually hear that in the songs. I think it turned out really well, and you can hear that she's also shining way more than on the other albums, at least in my opinion. And if it comes to the recording, yeah, we didn't separate everything. We actually recorded the whole rhythm section together as a band. Yeah. So what our producer Joost did was basically like, okay, let's just first rehearse the songs a few times, like we did, I guess, like a track per day, something like that.
Mhm.
And yeah, we would just like rehearse our asses off, and once he thought like, okay, you guys are warmed up, let's do like three takes, and perhaps leave it with that, and maybe repeat one or two pieces, and that's about it. And you can really hear that in the album. It sounds way more live than what we ever done before.
Right. That's
Yeah.
crazy. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, pretty much. It was heavy, but it was also very cool because normally, I don't know about you, but recording is not always my favorite part of
Mhm.
making music. I kind of prefer to be on stage. That's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I really to catch that raw energy. And normally when I'm in the studio and you record everything separately, like also each piece has to be like perfect in tune or timed perfectly. I really hate that. This kind of feels like you're working in a lab or at an office basically.
Right.
Now we were playing together as a band, and that really felt like making music like how it should be.
Right. So you
Yeah.
didn't find it more challenging at all since you guys used to write it all not together, but now you guys did it together? You didn't find it challenging more or anything?
Yeah, I guess that differs per band member. I mean, to me it really felt quite natural because I
Mhm.
really like the fact that when once I had an idea, for instance, for a song, I could ask our keyboard player Koen like, "Hey man, what do you think about this? Like, do you have some ideas about the arrangement, or if you're in doubt about something, like let's ask the drummer what he thinks about it. Like, is this even playable on the drum kit? Because I'm not a drummer, of course. And same with the vocals. I mean, it's very important to always keep in mind that there is enough space in a song for Simone to sing on, but
Right.
also that it's in the right key. Of course, I
Of
mean,
course.
in the end, she has to feel comfortable singing in those songs, and that's a small mistake that we kind of made in the past sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, or that's I don't call it a mistake. It's more like a learning process.
Right.
Is that back in the day, sometimes somebody would come like with a complete instrumental song, completely packed with guitars and orchestration and shit, and eventually there was almost no space for the vocals anymore.
Right.
It sounded great, but like, why don't we turn it around? Like, let's start with a very small, very basic idea. Let's see how the vocals work, and then kind of work from there on.
Right. And you're talking about this writing camp. I know you wrote all the bass, of course. That would make sense if you did. What songs did you include yourself on, not including bass?
Um, well, actually, to be very honest, when I write music, I always leave my bass parts to like really till the very end. I always
Nice.
wait till the very end to see like, okay, what do I really have to add as a bass player? I mean, I know that certain bass players kind of like to be on the forefront and to be very audible and everything. Of course, I do totally understand that, but in a case like Epica, I mean, our music is already pretty dense,
Mhm.
especially with all the orchestration and everything that's going on. So I think it's very important to play in service of the song, of course. So that's why I always kind of wait till the very end to decide what I'm actually going to play. Sometimes you can come up with the most crazy ideas for bass lines, but that doesn't mean that it will work in the song.
Right.
So
Of course.
yeah, and but I guess the song with the least bass parts is probably the title song, because there's mostly orchestration and piano and vocals.
That's crazy. And thinking about that, you're saying you record your bass last. Is there any looking back when you do listen to it after recording that you're like, I could do this a little differently. Let me do this instead.
Yeah, sure, sure, definitely. I mean, we even did that with those final recordings when we recorded it as a band. So I mean, there are certain parts in songs that I think like, this sounds better perhaps with a pick perhaps. But there are
Mhm.
also pieces that sound way better playing finger style. But
Right.
you need to be able to switch in between, and I mean, it still has to sound okay. Sometimes it's cool to change your sound a little bit, or make the bass sound a little bit grittier, or maybe a little
Right.
bit cleaner, stuff like that. So it's more like that.
Right. And with your approach live, do you kind of go back and forth with fingers and playing with the pick?
Yeah, 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 yeah. And I mean, in general, especially with Epica, I kind of prefer to play with a pick because
Mhm.
I think sound wise it fits the band better. Also, before I joined the band, I mean, the former bass player Evie also played with the pick, and it was, to me, it was a very important part of their sound.
Right.
Even though originally I'm a fingerstyle bass player, I really had to switch and get into that. And even though the band members told me like, "Hey man, just do your thing, whatever feels comfortable to you," I said like, "No, I always try to respect that sound that they already had, and work from there and see what happens."
That's pretty cool. Talking about tone wise, like we talked about, you've been in this band since 2012, and
Mhm.
it's been about what, like 10 years, or like over 10, well, over 10 years now.
Yeah.
Um, Discussing that, like, how has your tone changed and how has your gear changed since the beginning?
Well, when I joined the band, what I remember back then, I played with the Music Man basses and mostly with the like with the Sans amp from Tech 21. I mean
Mhm.
that always works.
Right.
But then I got in touch with these guys from Chile. One day I got an email from the former bass player from Aborted. He said like, "Hey man, I just got in touch with these two dudes from Chile. They are starting up this new company. They make distortion pedals for bass, and they are they're looking for artists. They are looking for feedback, and I think this might be something very cool for you." And first I thought like, yeah, whatever. I mean, there are a lot of people who get in touch with you who would like to work with you, but
Right.
well, these were the guys. These were actually the guys from Darkglass, and that's why back in the day when they were just starting. So I got in touch with them and said, like, of course I like to try it. I mean, I'm
Right.
already pretty happy with the Sanzam, but sure, if you have something that I mean, blow me away, of course. And they sent me actually one of the first prototypes of the B7K pedals.
Dang.
And when I plugged that in, I was like, oh, wait a minute, this is next level. Yeah, this is like all the good stuff from the Sanzam, but with a little bit more crunch and a little bit more modern tone. That's what I was looking for, actually. And same goes bass wise. I mean, I've been in touch with Dingwall guitars since the 90s, basically, but I have always had this, I don't know, perhaps bad luck that I was never able to really test them.
Yeah.
I remember when I just started playing bass, that was like 30 years ago or something like that. The first time I saw a Dingwall bass that was in a German store called Musikproduktiv. It's like one of the first mega stores in Europe.
Mhm.
And they had like two of the very first Dingwall bases over there. And the only reason why I didn't test them is basically because I got seasick seeing those frets, and I was like, that's probably not my thing. Now I kind of regret it that I didn't start playing those bases earlier. But later on, I remember like a friend of mine, he actually bought one of these Super J bases that I really loved because it had this classic look, but a very modern tone to it. And I said, "Well, yeah, where the hell did you get that bass?" He said, "Yeah, I was lucky, man. I just bought it in the store. Like, just get in touch with them if you're interested in buying one of those." So I actually got in touch with Shell and Dingwall back in the days when they were still like a very small boutique brand,
Mhm.
and that's when everything started rolling from there on. I mean, we started collaborating from the very beginning, and he was very open to my ideas about like would be the perfect bass for me, and from there on, the whole collaboration between Dingwall and Darkglass started to grow. So
Dang.
and it's kind of around the same time that when Nolly was doing that thing as well. Actually, we are probably the first two bass players actually to use that combination.
That's actually crazy, man. And that's I've seen your signature bass. It's gorgeous. How did you come up with that design, and how involved did they let you get?
Yeah, well, actually, I have to blame Sheldon Dingle for the awesome design. It's I remember after he built my first Super J bass. That was one of the very first Dingle basses with three pickups, actually.
That's crazy.
I was blown away by it. But
Right.
funny enough, one day I was kind of messing around with the pickup setting because I thought like, okay, I have another Dingwall bass that sounds a little bit more, I don't know, it had a little bit of a more growly tone to it because of the settings of the pickups. Because my other bass was actually switched in series instead of parallel. So I asked my guitar tech, can you change that? Can you put this bass into series? He said, yeah, no problem. And when he did that, he came up with this crazy combination of like basically putting on all three pickups at the same time with the neck pickup in series. And that sounded so brutal. I was really blown away. So I asked Sheldon like, could you be able to make me a bass like this, but then in as a four string, but then with the same scale? So I needed a long scale four string. I said, yeah, we can do that, but that might take some time because I have to redesign the body and everything because of the scale difference and blah blah blah. But funny enough, a week later, he came back to me. He said, like, I've always had this idea to maybe one day do something with a like more like a Thunderbird kind of model.
Yeah.
Like, would you be into it to maybe combine those two projects? And I said, yeah, hey, be my guest. Let's do it. And that's where actually the D Rock eventually came from. That's how this whole thing came together. And from a one-off base, eventually became a whole line and like a real like a catalog model.
Mm.
And later on, it's yeah, it was actually an award-winning bass, and from there on, it came the idea for the Hellboy bass, the signature bass, and so on.
That's crazy. That's
Yeah,
That's very interesting, and then the artwork on the base is gorgeous too. Like, you're already really creative anyways because 'cause you're covered in tattoos, so it's
yeah,
it's
right.
crazy, man.
Yeah,
It's
exactly. That and it was funny because I remember we were actually at NAM, I believe 2019, and D Rock was, I believe, the bass of the year at NAM back then.
Mhm.
And then he said, like, okay, man, you've been so. I mean, this collaboration has been great. I think you deserve, or at least we believe that you deserve your own signature bass.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and then his assistant said, "Yeah, but you need a Hellboy bass." He said, "Why do I need a Hellboy bass?" He said, "Well, you're a huge Hellboy nerd, and we want actually to combine those two things together somehow." And said, "But well, how are we going to do that?" Well, I don't know. He said, "We're not familiar with like using artwork and stuff like that, so, because you're probably going to need a license, or you can't just use that because of the copyrights and such." He said, "So well, perhaps you can find a way to figure out how that works." So eventually, I got in touch with Mike Mignola himself through Facebook, and he was in for it. So yeah, there you go. That's basically the whole story. That's how things got rolling for that model as well.
That's crazy. That's interesting, especially because you went through all that to get that and you got it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It took some time because that model got launched like around COVID time, and there was a lot of stuff going on. But yeah,
I remember that.
yeah, exactly. If it comes to producing the base, it was pretty much a hassle. But later on, things started to get a little bit more stable, and eventually it also sold out because it was a limited run, of course.
Of course. And
Yeah.
then we have to talk about it. You recorded bass on this record. How is your, like, bass on the recording differ from being live? Do you change much of your like, stuff, your pedals, you use all the same stuff?
It's relatively the same. It kind of depends. Live. we work with a different setting in the sense that we mostly work with like digital consoles, and
Of
our front of
course.
house guy, he kind of prefers me to deliver a clean signal so he can do anything what he wants at the
Of
front of
course.
house with plugins and all that stuff. And so we have a pretty modern approach if it comes also to how to process my sound. If it comes to my in-ear sound, I used to work with the Dargas pedals, but now I'm working also with a quad cortex from an old DSP.
Mm.
Just and that's only just to make my in-ear sound. That's about it. If it comes to the overdrive and everything, that's all done by my front of house engineer. He has all the plugins for it, and we all do that separately. If it comes to the studio, I mostly work with dark glass pedals combined with like a rack version of the Sans amp with a distressor. And in some cases, I also use my old Ampeg rig, who's actually that's both like basically like the house rig of the studio where we play, because I don't use it live anymore because it's
Of course.
way too heavy. And
Of course. Yeah.
yeah, and if I would bring it along, it would only make our crew, grumpy.
Yeah, they'd hate you more. Probably be like, this
Yeah,
guy bringing the Ampeg fridge with him. God, I'm just kidding.
yeah. It's crazy, man. I mean, I remember when we were in the studio and I was trying out some stuff with it, and like actually putting the top on top of the cab was already, that's already a workout.
Right? You don't have to work out at all. Like when if you did that live, you could just bring that
Mhm,
would work
mhm.
out perfectly. When
Yeah.
touring, how many basses do you bring with you? And how often do you change like do you have many different tunings?
Yeah, I do use different tunings, but I must say, like, I also work with like with key extenders, because sometimes there are actually songs that sometimes, I mean, in general are like tune in B, but sometimes there can be like a very cool low A in it, so you
Right.
can use the key extender and switch to A and then switch back again. I do that
Right.
on a couple of tracks. There are some songs that are like in A standard. There are some crazy tunings on the new album as well. But what we're trying out right now, especially with the quad cortex, it has like an amazing transpose function in it. So if you want to, you can actually play with one bass the whole show
Oh
and
shit.
change
That's
tunings
crazy.
with the pedal.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, yeah, because those transpose functions, they are. I was always very skeptical about it,
Right.
especially if it comes to bass playing, because
Mhm.
of the delay and signal loss and such. But everything till like, let's say, like a minor third below the normal range that you're playing in, or the normal key you're playing in, it works just fine. It's works perfectly. So yeah, normally I always tour like maybe 2 or 3 basses, because that's enough, and
Right.
that's about it. But if I want to, two should be enough.
Are you like I was interviewing the dude from Wolfheart and he was telling me that he has like one main base and after like he has to switch because something happens,
Yeah.
basically it's over for him. He's like he wants the show to be done. Are you kind of like one of those people too?
Yeah, well, it kind of depends. I mean, sometimes it's cool to switch bass because you can, but
Right.
but in general, I mean, if I feel comfortable on one instrument and it can do everything with one instrument, yeah, why not? Of course. Yeah,
And you came in the band like a little later, of course.
yeah,
There's 4 albums before you. Did you like because I know you have to play some of those songs, there's famous songs off of those.
yeah.
Did you make them your own or did you kind of keep them how he wrote them or what was your process with that, especially playing them live?
Yeah, well, in the beginning, I tried to respect those parts as much as
Mhm.
possible. But I remember also, he even told me, like, the first album, he didn't even play bass on that. That it mostly done by the producer. He said, like, yeah, even he gave his own twist to it. And yeah, funny enough, like through the years, you kind of like, I don't know if we do it like, if I do it on purpose, but it kind of changed anyway. Because when I listen to bass lines from live recordings from 10 years ago compared to now, some songs already sound different, like different approaches or different things of improvising where there's actually space to improvise. But in general, I try to respect the bass parts as much as possible as they are done in the studio. But then again, playing in the studio can be completely different than playing live, especially with some of the earlier albums, like when they were really focused on like making everything like perfect in tune and everything. Sometimes
Mhm.
perfect, a simple example, like playing an A on an A string or on a E string itself. It's a completely different sound.
Of course, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there you go. I mean, sometimes it makes more sense in the studio to make it sound as clean as possible because it works better in the mix. But sometimes live, you want to have that a little bit more body, so then it makes more sense to play it on the E string.
Of course.
So that's already like one of those examples that I mean, yeah, sometimes you just like change it how it feels over the PA, you know?
And do you do that with your own bass lines? Do you kind of improvise each show, or do you try to keep them a little, or try to spice them up, or
Yeah. Eventually, because I noticed with the rest of the band as well, like especially our drummer was, he always like he has this like main parts, but he always changes them. It's like,
right. That's cool though.
yeah, exactly. And then we also kind of anticipate with that as well. And because I mean that's the cool thing about this band. We don't take ourselves too damn seriously, let alone on stage. So we're always kind of playing with each other, and also sometimes making jokes in between, and just changing things just for the sake of, keeping things interesting for us as well. Yeah.
And I'm gonna go back to that writing camp you guys had. You guys had 11 songs going in on this record. Is there any that you guys wrote that didn't make it on this record?
Yeah, absolutely. There were, I believe in total, we had like 19 concepts or something like that. And then we just made a choice like, okay, what are the demos that we believe the most in, and
Mhm.
use those for the album. That's kind of like the approach that we always have. Like we just write as many ideas as possible. And then we look at our producer like, okay, dude, what's going to be realistic for you? Like the amount of songs that we should be able to record, like also regarding the timeline, and also be a budget, of course, because if you want to, you can record all the songs. But yeah, in the end, we're always like a very on a tight schedule with all the touring that comes up and all the other projects. Because also after this album, we went straight into the Symphonic Synergy project, which was also a shitload of work.
It seems
So yeah, exactly. So we also had to keep that in mind as well. And we also recorded "The Ghost in Me," which was used for this theme park here in Holland. So we had to sacrifice one song for that song to be able to record that.
that's insane, man. Like your schedule just sounds intense right there.
Yeah, it is.
And and like I was gonna bring up the symphonic energy synergy. With that, like how did that all come about? And on top of that, being with such a like it's an orchestra, how do you go about learning stuff like that and doing that live? It must be a whole different process for you.
Yes and no. The idea, well, blame our manager because he was constantly pushing us like, oh, we should do another show with orchestra, and we were like, yeah, cool, dude, but when? And then he said like, oh, after you record the album, you guys have like a huge amount of time. You should be able to pull that off. Well, it happened, but it was very tight, I can tell you. But if it comes to the arrangements and everything, well, in a way, we already write our songs with having like an orchestra with it in mind,
Yeah.
of course, and especially since the last couple of albums, we worked with the Prague Philharmonic Orchestra anyway to record that. So the scores are already there. That already makes a difference. Of course, you always have to adapt a little bit because there are certain songs where you only use like a limited amount of strings or brass or percussion and what. So you always have to make adaptations, and you always have to double check all of those parts and so on. But in general, the good thing is that a lot of songs already have those parts. So
Right.
you already have like a very good starting point. If you have to like do what Metallica did, for instance, and basically have like these metal songs and add an orchestra to it, that's a whole different story.
Yeah. That's true. And coming up with a set list like that that matches with it and flows perfectly with an orchestra. How do you
Yeah.
guys do something like that?
Yeah, just try out, and just come up with a lot of ideas and see, and make playlists. Like, does this make sense? Does that make sense? Some songs also got changed. Like, for instance, the opening track, "Unleashed," Koen, our keyboard player, came up with this cool idea to say, like, instead of opening with a huge intro and blowing people straight away, but blow their faces off when we get on stage, he said, like, maybe it would be cool to start with this very minimalistic approach, like very small, just Simone, just some orchestration, and then build up from there. Just so
Yeah.
do it completely the other way around. And that was also a very interesting approach, and I really like that, to be honest.
Do you guys see yourself doing that with this new record? Kind of putting it to well, it's already kind of to a symphony, like you say, you guys always do, but doing it to a full symphony live.
Yeah, I must say, like, especially since those last few shows that we did with the orchestra, I think it's going to happen again.
Right.
Of course, first we're going to do some tours just as the band, and
Yeah.
then we have to work with the backing tracks. I know that sounds kind of like blasphemy, but at the same time, we don't have any choice anyway. So
I think a lot of people don't get that backing
yeah,
tracks makes a differ live, that you kinda need them. You guys are actually playing you're not Motley Crue in it, you guys are actually playing your instruments. It's
yeah.
not like bull crap,
Mm.
you guys are actually playing. It's
Yeah. I understand that people can't complain about that. But then in the end, I mean, we're a live band. We it even happened before that we had technical problems during shows, whereas all of a sudden, like the hard disk was like vanished. You couldn't hear any click track on your in ear, and it was like we were looking at each other like, okay, we can do two things. Like we can stop and start all over, or we're just going to finish the song. And
Right.
most of the times we just finish the song, and if there's no backing track, yeah, fuck it.
Right. That's a lot of people don't get how much things change live. It's an
Mhm.
interesting process. And I have to ask with the symphony, how much of it did you have in your in-ears or did you kind of just keep it how you had usually do live?
Yeah, I'll be very honest. There is so much information when you're on stage. You already like hear so much of the orchestra through your in ears already
Yeah.
because you're so close to it. That I decided, like in my case, I said like, okay, let's just go for click track just for the cues. I
Mhm.
want to be able to hear the drummer, and I want to be able to hear myself, and that's it. And of course, Simone, especially
Of
for
course.
announcements and stuff like that.
Of course. That makes sense though. That's the easier route. And I have to ask with this new record, there is some longer songs. How do you guys make those kind of transfer live? Especially, I mean, you guys are a headlining band, but you have to fit so many songs in one set.
Yeah. That's a good question. That's it's always a compromise. I mean, on one hand, you want to play all the new songs, but then again, there are always fans who want to hear like the old stuff. And if you make a balance in between, then people will always complain about it. It's like,
Right.
why didn't you play those old songs? And then other people say, yeah, why didn't you play those new songs? So, and the same story for the like the long songs because like there are a lot of fans who are asking for us to do like the whole Kingdom of Heaven trilogy. That's already like 45 minutes if we would play that whole song. Perhaps one day we'll do that. Same goes for like the New Age Dawns songs because now we just closed that whole cycle with the ninth part of that. Perhaps we can do a set list one day with playing all those songs. I mean that sounds like a cool
Yeah.
idea. But then again, that's only for the diehard fans. If we would do that on a festival, then we're probably be screwed because people don't understand that.
Yeah, that's crazy though, man. And like with this new album, do you think there's like certain songs that are gonna translate better live than or what do you think so with this record?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure that especially the more compact songs will work anyway.
Mhm.
But then again, we actually wrote this new album especially with the intention that they should all be able to be played live. Like back in the past, sometimes like especially Mark has this habit of coming up with these insane riffs that sometimes are just like he just programs what he comes up with, and then we first have to find out if it's actually playable on the guitar. But some of those songs are like work better on record than they do live. But this new album was definitely written with the intention of that all songs should be playable live. So it's going to be very interesting which songs will eventually will end up on the set list and which won't, and perhaps we'll kind of rotate with those songs. I don't know. It's still very early, and we just have to find out.
Right. And with you guys having like I said, longer songs and there's a lot of changes in your songs.
Mhm.
What do you find challenging like playing those live? Do you do a lot of rehearsing for yourself or what's challenging about it?
The most challenging part is probably just to get into the routine.
Yeah.
And that's the most important part because that's something that we also learned. Like, I don't mind rehearsing, that's fine. But like I told you, like everybody lives all spread all over Europe.
Right.
So rehearsing and planning rehearsal, especially with now, like most people in the band are also have a family at home.
Yeah.
That's not always that easy. So if everybody is well prepared, we do just like a couple of days of rehearsing and
Mhm.
just get into the tour and just get into the routine. That's basically the most important part because you can rehearse your ass off if you want to, but eventually playing on stage is always different than doing it in a rehearsal space. But the good thing is, like, especially the people who have played those parts, especially the rhythm section, for instance, for us, it's already much easier to play those new songs because even though it's been a while since we recorded it, we've recorded those songs. It's already like it's still in your fingers somehow.
Right. And of course, like, is there any songs that you wish you guys played more from past records?
Ooh, yeah. Well, sometimes I mean, I have this special connection with an album like Requiem for the Indifferent. That was the album that got released when I joined the band. It's like I almost ended up actually playing on that record because that was also one of the reasons why the bass player left eventually because he was too busy with his other work and there was no beef between him and the other band members. He still comes to our shows and still a good friend of ours, but there are some tracks on that album that I would like to play again, like especially the opening track, Monopoly on Truth. I have this very special bond with that track because then it reminds me of that energy when I just joined the band.
Dang, that's cool though.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
And with having like so many records, like we're talking about you wanting to play more, what would your dream tour? What would your dream set list be for this band?
Oof, ooh, that's a very difficult question. Like what I mentioned before, I would love to do one day, like do the whole Kingdom of Heaven trilogy, like I
Yeah.
said. It would be also cool to do some more from the Divine Conspiracy. That's like the third album.
Hmm.
I would definitely like to see how it would turn out if we play all the 9 New Age Dawns tracks, stuff like that. It's just like a very, I would definitely like to do like a very non-obvious experimental set.
Right. Would
But
you
the
ever
music,
want?
sorry?
Would you ever want to do something like Metallica does, where they do the 2 nights?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. That's what I really liked about that. I think that's a very original idea to do like completely two completely different set lists. I know certain band members will probably already get a stroke if you think about it, but yeah. Then again, I think that would be a pretty cool idea, especially for the fans.
I'm talking about that. Did you go both nights? Because I know you played one of the nights when you guys were doing the European show with them.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Actually, like, because for instance, when I that's a pretty cool story, by the way. When we did the show in Sweden, I saw this message on Instagram from the Cliff Burton family that actually Cliff's family would come over to the show, but they would also go to the memorial site where they would remember Cliff for the very first time because they never went there before. And then I was like, holy shit, I've never been there. And if they're going there, and they're inviting people to come over, like I'm going to rebook my flight. I want to be there.
right.
So I actually went a day earlier to check the other show, and the day afterwards, yeah. Long story short, I eventually like joined his family. They said like, "Hey man, no problem. You can drive with us, and we'll go there, and you're more than welcome." And that was a very special experience, I can tell you.
Did they tell you any cool stories about Cliff?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. A lot of them were pretty sad, I must say. Like especially how things went after he passed away. Because back then, back in the day, I mean, Metallica was still a pretty poor band financially, of course, because they were still just mostly like an opening
Right.
band for the major acts. A lot of Cliff stuff got stolen by certain people whose name I won't mention. And also, what was really bizarre that actually Casey, his stepsister, she said like we recently actually found back a shirt of his. Like which one? Like yeah, the famous Dawn of the Dead shirt that he's wearing on the Master of Puppets. Like I said, and here it is here. And she pushed it like that shirt in my hands, and I was like, this feels pretty damn weird.
I
She
would have
said
like
she's actually
faint.
going to put that in the museum today that people can make pictures with. But now, yeah, here you can hold it and everything. It's like this is pretty
Dang.
insane. Okay, well, thank you very much. And she said, yeah, if you want to come over one day and also play on this rig and everything, that's all cool, no problem. So I actually got in touch with them and also became friends.
Yeah.
The most bizarre moment was actually when we were there on at the Memorial Stone.
Hmm.
Um, their driver actually asked like all the fans after a while to say like, okay, the Cliff Burton family wants some time for themselves because this is the first time that they're actually there. Unfortunately, Ray never made it there. And then I never said this in an interview, by the way. This is this kind of like a premiere actually.
Still special.
Yeah, it is. It is. So all the fans went off, and I said, like, okay, I'm going to leave you alone. He said, no, join me,
Dang.
please. Okay, why is that? They're like, yeah, we're going to do something very special. And then she came up with this bag, and it was actually Ray Burton's ashes.
Oh shit.
And he said, like, I want you to join me in spreading those ashes over here.
Wow.
So I said, yeah, well, ladies first. He said, well, no, in this case, you're first. So I put my hand in the bag and spread the ashes around the memorial stone over there, along with her. And that was pretty emotional, I can tell you.
That's a hell of a moment, man. That's like something you can never forget. That's
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
That's
I
something
remember those words
closing.
when she said, like, we're going to reunite Cliff with his dad.
That must have been like a crying moment right there, dude. I would have cried. I've been like,
Yeah, yeah.
man.
To be honest, at the moment, I was so flabbergasted that I didn't know what to think at the moment, to be honest.
Right.
But that was really insane. Later on, she also said that Cliff's, that Ray's ashes are spread over there, like part of the ashes, of course. But yeah, to be part of that, that was like this is part of like music history. What's happening
Yeah.
basically here, and Cliff being like one of the biggest influences, like of old metal bass players all over the world. Like, how close can you get to that?
That's insane. Are you ever gonna try to play as Rick because she invited you to?
Oh yeah. I know that she's actually also coming over to one of our shows in Europe this summer, and later on, then once I get the opportunity to go back to the States again and have some time to spend with them,
Of
then
course.
I'm definitely going over. Yeah, absolutely.
That's so cool, man. That's a hell of a story. I feel pretty cool that you told me that story.
Yeah.
'Cause 'cause it's already a big thing. A lot of people I interview, they wanna play with Metallica, that's their dream tour lineup, and you've already done that. And
Yeah.
I do have to bring up that you said you went both nights. Was there any songs you were impressed that they played live that you've been dying to see? And then is there any songs that you're bummed they didn't play?
Oof, that's pretty hard to say, to be honest. I'll be very honest that those shows that we did together, to me, like it's almost felt like a blur because it's so surreal.
Right.
I just I just enjoyed the shows to the max. I was like, okay, whatever they're gonna play, I'm just gonna enjoy it. I liked it that they actually made a nice mixture of like the real old school stuff with
Yeah.
the very modern stuff, or modern the new stuff that it's not that modern. It's like actually the new stuff sounds pretty old school to be honest.
Right.
But yeah, it was mostly the whole experience that stuck with me. Like also how they treated us. They were like such cool guys, so down to earth, and also like I didn't expect that to happen. Like James came over, like each show he came over to us to check out like how we were doing,
Mhm.
just to talk about music and
Nice.
stuff. That was really cool. And they're really cool people, and also the crew, they were so nice. I didn't expect them to be so down to earth, to be really honest.
Right, and they have a unique stage. How was that for you, compared to the stages you have played on?
That's that's weird. It's really weird. Like I remember the first show in Paris because yeah, eventually Five Finger Death Punch dropped out because of the I believe Ivan had a surgery with his neck or something like that. And so it was a pretty last minute thing to actually join that tour.
Right,
Um, but when we arrived there, it was like wow, this huge arena, and then you see this like snake pit stage,
right,
and even their stage managers said like, "Hey guys, you can use the whole stage. There's no limit. You can walk around whatever you want." I said, "Are you sure about that?" Because normally we're used to if you play with bigger bands, they always say like, "No, here's like white gaffer tape," and they say like, "Okay, you can only play over here, and you're not allowed to go over there," and shit like that. That's what I was expecting, and
yeah,
but they said like, "No, no, you can use the whole stage. In fact, we encourage you to use the whole stage because you're going to need it, or else
right,
you're going to get crazy because of all the echo and stuff like that." Even
right,
Kirk said that. Like he said, he still actually the whole band was saying that. Like they still, I mean, they like how the cool thing about the stage is that you can have like perfect interaction with the audience because on one hand it's big, but at the
right,
same time it's small and intimate because like people are so close to you. That's the cool thing. It's like on one hand you're playing in an arena, and at the same time it almost feels like you're playing in a club and people are in your face.
right,
But yeah, they said also like if you have the opportunity, just walk around as much as you can so you get used to it
right.
because it's really weird. Because normally you're used to that typical traditional band setup where you're close to the drummer, and all of a sudden you're like, I don't know, almost a yard away of your drummer, like waving like I'm over here and I can't hear you.
Did you have
Yeah,
any moments where you guys are being silly together like that?
yeah, absolutely. We were constantly, actually, they were also pretty impressed that we really used that stage because we were constantly walking around and walking around because that's kind of like this unwritten rule that we have with Epica on stage. Like we have our main setup on stage. Like I'm trying to think around like keyboards, drums. There's some space in the middle, and then you have like the space in front, of course.
Mhm.
And we always look around like, oh, there's a gap over there. Let's change. And okay, then we also look, okay, the guitar player's over there. There's a gap over there. Let's move over there. So we are constantly changing our position. That's kind of like an interaction that we have on stage.
So cool.
So when we were doing that with the snake pit, I was looking like, okay, our guitar player Isaac is over there. Now he's walking to the keyboard player. I'm going to walk over there, and constantly changing positions, such like that. That's really cool.
And I know that they had a few did you guys do the whole thing like how they had, because I think I saw Charlie do it with Pantera, they had a few drums set up in different spots. Did you guys do stuff like that?
We wish. No, no, we only had one drum kit for
Dude,
those.
that's cra that's that I thought that was interesting. That's like a hell of a situation.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, like if we wanted to do that, we were able to do that because they
Yeah,
said like, hey guys, you can do whatever you want as long as you get your stage or your stuff on stage in time, and you also get
yeah,
it off stage in time. Then
right.
we're all cool with that. You can do whatever you want. But
And
we're
with
like, yeah, one drum kit should do it.
right. And with playing with bands like that, what do you take and put towards your own career or advice-wise?
The biggest advice, like, and that sounds for some people it might sound silly, but like I remember, like James came to our dressing room and he said, "Look, at the end of the like just before he left, he said, okay, guys, I know that of course you're in a sport band and people come from Metallica, but keep one thing in mind is like whatever happens, if they like you or not, make sure that you guys are having fun together.
That's a good one.
And that's something that I also bear in mind. Like also, if it comes to writing an album or being on stage, like no matter what happens, make sure that you're having fun in what you do.
Right.
Because if even if you're playing in the biggest band in the world, even if you're selling like millions of records, if you're not enjoying what you're doing, you're screwed.
It's true
That's
though.
that's not going to work, and it doesn't matter at which level you're operating. It's so important to have fun together as a band, and not to like I mean, I see a lot of bands who just like for them it's just a job because that's all they can do. I guess that in a way also kind of goes for us as well. But then again, we're really enjoying what we're doing, and that's something that really matters.
Agree, like all the way, man, with that. And I have to ask you, like I said, you played with Metallica. That's everyone's dream. That's whenever I ask this question, what's you already done that, so you can't say that. What's your dream tour lineup that you haven't played with?
Ooh, dream tour lineup. That's a good one. Well, one thing that's definitely on our wish list is that it would be great one day because we once did a show together with Nightwish and with Invitation,
Uh-huh.
and then it was already like, okay, there's already like that, and Epic has already like three of the big bands from that genre. It would be great if we one day could do a tour like with all like the big names from that scene, like let's say with Invitation, Evanescence, Nightwish, Lacuna Coil, Epica, stuff like that. That would be really great. And I think that also for the fans, that would be like an ultimate opportunity to see, yeah, a show of a lifetime.
And would you want to kind of like a mixture set list with each band, or would you want them to be like kind of where they do one album or
Yeah, that
anything?
sounds pretty cool. I know that fans really appreciate stuff like that, and
Yeah,
perhaps do a different album each show.
that would be very interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
That'd be very interesting. Do you have any tour rituals or crazy writer request?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, if it comes to the writer, not regarding me, I know that Marcus always wants some chocolate milk on stage because he believes that it produces a slime and he sounds a little bit more gurgly when he grunts. Well, okay, fine, that's I believe that. But in general, what I do before the show is a lot of good stretching to make sure that I don't fuck up my neck during the show and after the show, of course. I'm pretty much into yoga. I know that doesn't sound rock and roll at all, but I know that a lot of people do that, and that is a really pretty much an ass saver. And I always like to, first be very calm, almost kind of get into this meditation kind of state of mind, and then eventually we wish each other a good show, and then we go and work out.
That's a good one. And
Yeah.
then you've toured the world. Is there any, well, basically the whole world. Is there any places you love playing in? Is there any places you wish you could play that you haven't?
Yeah, I mean it's always a joy to play. I mean, one of the craziest places to go is always Latin America. I mean, everything from Mexico till Guatemala, Costa Rica, Brazil, Argentina. I mean, people over there, they are insane. They have so much passion
Oh
for
yeah.
what we do, and it's like, yeah, that's undescribable. That's always also like the big difference between the Amsterdam show with the symphonic synergy compared to Mexico. I mean, both were great. I mean, both were absolutely amazing, but in Mexico, it was like, yeah, it's we blew the rooftop off. It's insane, like how passionate people are over there. It's like pure fire what you're actually experiencing over there, and that's always like a huge joy to get to go there. If it comes to places we haven't been to, well, we played in quite some places. It would be interesting. Like we once played South Africa, for instance. It would be cool if we could do a little bit more over there.
Nice. Yeah.
I would love to return to New Zealand because we only played there once. And I know it sounds crazy, but somehow I would like to go to this. Yeah, I mean, we haven't played on the North Pole yet, so why not?
That'd be pretty interesting.
Yeah,
That'd be
yeah,
very
yeah, that would
interesting.
be pretty interesting. Something like something very crazy like that, for instance.
And I always ask people, you've probably seen this with a lot of my clips. So from touring, is there any restaurants, even Europe, US, favorite ones you like to go to? And if so, what's your order?
Well, the thing is, what I always like to do is, yeah, it kind of depends because in general, I always like to be, I always try to be as careful as possible to not get food poisoning on tour because believe me, that's one of the worst things that can happen to you. I already apologized to Simone and Mark for saying this, but it happened once somewhere in South America. I'm not going to say which show it was because then people will start laughing, but they had such a bad food poisoning that actually Simone had to get off stage in between each song to throw up. Mark even crapped his pants. I mean, it happened to me once. I mean, it happened to me as well once. So I'm also guilty as charged. But it was so bad. You don't believe me. You don't want to have that. That's
Man, to play through that is insane. That must be like a hell. That's like an experience in itself, right there, man.
yeah, yeah,
Trying to
yeah,
concentrate through the song just to
yeah.
get through.
Yeah, I had so much respect for them when it happened to them because, and funny enough, it's not that funny, but weirdly enough, it's like they had the vegetarian options, and they are the ones who got sick. Like, and I'm to be honest, I'm a pescatarian myself. I always try. I don't eat meat on tour,
Right,
especially to also keep the food as light as possible.
right.
But to answer your question, to go back to that story, I always want to try local food. That's always like a high on my list, like and as obscure as possible. Like I
Obscure.
remember going to Brazil, I even had like real, like true Amazonian food and experienced these tastes that I never experienced before. That's so cool.
It's just interesting to find out what people like. It must be hard to find stuff to eat on tour. Not gonna lie for you guys.
Yeah, sometimes it can be. I mean, you can always go for the typical stuff, but at the same time, on one hand, I want to like try to take care of myself to eat as healthy as possible, of course, and nutritious as possible. Yeah, because or else you're gonna get screwed if you getting sick on tour is one of the worst things you can
Right.
have. It's awful. So and at the same time, I will also like to always try to kind of like push the boundaries and try some local stuff like crazy stuff. Even once, I can tell you that story as well. I was in Mexico, for instance. We went to this what they called like an Aztec traditional steakhouse, and we were like, "What's so traditional about that?" Because it just looked like a very luxurious steakhouse. But then they said, "Okay, we call ourselves an Aztec restaurant, so we're also going to serve some like real traditional stuff here as well." I said, like what? So, well, then they came up with this like these big pots with stuff they opened up, and believe it or not, it was like you could choose between living worms or fried worms, and all this stuff like that. And everybody was like, "Dude, get the hell out of here!" But then I was looking at Mark, and I was like, "Hmm." At the same time, I mean, it looks gross, it smells gross, but then again, I never had it before. I mean, people eat this for a reason, right?
Oh my god.
Yeah, I know. And then he was looking at me and said, "Well, I'm going to have one of the living ones and one of the fried ones if you're also going to have it." I
Sounds like
said,
a
"Deal."
drinking game.
So we went for it. But funny enough, the living ones tasted better than the fried ones. The fried one really tasted like I was eating fish. And I remember saying that, like putting one in my mouth. I was like, "Dude, this is horrible. This tastes like fish food." And then the keyboard player said, "Yeah, that's because it is fish food, you idiot." Yeah, yeah. Well, there you go. There you have an example.
That's a crazy example, not gonna lie, man.
Yeah.
Is that one of the challenges you find going on tour? Going through experiences like that?
Yeah, exactly. They're going through the crazy shit as well. But yeah, it's then again, I mean, I can say that I tried it, and well, there you go.
Is that one of your most like, crazy experiences from touring, or do you have a crazier one?
I'm pretty sure there are also crazier things out there, but I'll keep those for myself for now.
You're like, can't tell those. I already told you enough about us puking on stage and going to
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah. There you go. And even worse things happen, but I'm not going to tell everything because we got to keep it interesting and yeah.
right, right. And so you're very covered in tattoos. Have you gone over them a few times? And how long has your whole process been? I have. I mean, I've watched some of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, actually, I started. Well, first of all, I wanted to do this for a long time, but I simply couldn't find the right artist. It was like you probably know it yourself as well. Like,
It's hard.
yeah, you have to find an artist that first of all, I mean, the artwork has to really you really have to feel a connection to it, but you also have to feel a connection to that person because it's not like just going to a dentist and get a filling and that's about it. It's like a really like a, it's quite a ritual to do something like that, and you really have to trust that person as well because you're stuck with it for the rest of your life, of course, if they do it correctly. That is. Um, so it took quite a while till one day. Actually, my ex girlfriend found it on Facebook, I believe on Facebook or on Instagram. Like, dude, you should check out this artist. She's amazing. And then I checked it out and was like, yeah, this is a certain style that really appeals to me. Like it's how she describes herself is like I believe she calls it like illustrating realism, and which makes sense because on one hand it's realistic what she makes, but at the same time she has a certain style that it looks like a painting in a way. And she
Okay.
does it she does it on purpose because she also says like if you do it like completely realistic, it will probably become a little bit too thin, and it will vanish like in a couple of years.
That's
So
true.
she likes to also work like with really like hard lines and like really like very saturated colors and stuff like that. And I liked it. And I started like 4 years ago or something like that.
Dang.
Yeah, and for now, I guess in total we're now on like 75 hours or something like that.
Dang, how many sessions is that for you?
Depends. I mean, the longest session I had was probably 9 hours, and the shortest was some because it once happened that we were on tour, and she's based in Riga in Latvia, in the Baltic states. And once we were touring there, she said like, "Oh, come on, come over to have a cup of coffee." And he was like, "Oh, we're here anyway. Just 2 hours because she just for the sake of doing it, you know."
Right.
And yeah, I guess that must have been like 12 or 14 sessions in total, something like that.
It's not bad. Have you gone over it at all? Because you know how it is. It takes a few times to make
Yeah,
it where
yeah,
it stays very vibrant, and
yeah.
it vanishes. You know.
Yeah, exactly. But so far she hasn't done any color corrections or anything so far, and it's. But I must also say she also like she really puts it in pretty deep. That's. It's yeah, you know it yourself. It's certain places, certain spots are kind of like, oh, this feels like basically like almost like trimming. Yeah, you don't know how it is to trim your beard, but it's almost like using a trimmer in a certain way. And other spots can be like hell,
Right. I
especially when you do like white accents with a single needle. That's always like big fun.
needles. I can't do. I don't like outlining. But
There you go.
and do you plan to add more anytime soon? Because I know. Are you going for a bodysuit? What's your goal?
Yeah, well, I just started. I'll be very honest. I started with the idea like, oh, I just want to sleeve, then let's start with that. But
Oh,
then
it
when
works.
I saw, yeah, well, you know how it goes, right? You start with one idea and eventually you go like, this is pretty addictive. First, I didn't understand it at all. That also people were like, kind of, saying like, okay, yeah, does it hurt? Yeah, it does hurt, but at the same time, you get this adrenaline rush out of
Right.
it somehow. And now I do understand how it works. But yeah, and from there on, I was like, yeah, I want more. I want more. Like let's make a whole concept out of it and make
Right.
everything connected together. And that's something that I definitely bear in mind. Next step will probably be connecting the shoulders, probably go for the back. I still want some stuff doing on my legs as well. And but that's like I don't have any plans. In the beginning, I was very impatient, and I was
Yeah.
like, I want to finish these two sleeves as soon as possible.
Right.
And that happened, I guess, in a time lapse of like maybe a year. Yeah, well, yeah, you know everything
I
about
did
it.
every 2 weeks for about 4 years.
Wow,
Yeah,
wow,
I got to a point where I had to take a year off because he couldn't touch me because I was like, "No!"
completely swollen.
He's like, "What's wrong with you?" But
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. Well, I totally understand. That's yeah, that's pretty insane. Yeah, well, the thing is also, I mean, I really have to travel all the way to Riga for it. So at the same time, perhaps that's a good thing. And sometimes I was also not able to do it because of the tours in between.
Yeah, of
And she also
course.
said, like, if you come over, please. I mean, you know how intense this can be, especially with color tattoos. Is like,
Right,
make sure you're rested, or else you're
right.
screwed.
It's true, though, it's true. And
Hmm.
and then I'll get into the next thing. I had to bring up how have you been doing, like, hot sauces and stuff like that? Do you
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
can you see yourself doing one for this album, and how did you get into this whole making hot sauce situation?
Yeah. It's funny how those things work out. It's always it's like it always happens kind of like in like an accident. Basically, it's
Right.
originally I do. I mean, I have always been a cook. I was really raised like with food is something very special in our family, especially Indonesian cuisine because Indonesia also used to be like a Dutch colony, and there are a lot of people from Indonesia that live here.
Mhm.
Perhaps you also know it, like the brother from Van Halen. They also are Dutchies with Indonesian roots, and they have the same backstory, but eventually they immigrated to the States. But they are also used to be like pretty much in that cuisine as well, and it's
Right.
pretty spicy. It's kind of like a mixture. I know that Indonesian people will probably get insulted when I say this, but it's a kind of a mixture between Indian and kind of like Thai food, but it has its own identity for sure. Actually, each and every island in Indonesia has a specific cuisine. Having
Okay.
said that, it's pretty spicy, and they use a lot of sambal, which is like I don't know if you know what a sambal is.
I do not.
Yeah, it's basically a pepper paste. Like it's a combination of pepper, onions, garlic, spices, and such, and it has a very specific taste. And they use it a lot as a basis for a lot of dishes.
Mhm.
And that's something that I really learned from that cuisine as well. And one day, a friend of mine who eventually became my partner in Rock Chile, my side company. And he had this garden. He said, like, I'm growing pepper plants. So, okay, good for you, fine. But one day he came to me and he kind of forgot, like, once they start growing, they grow like crazy. And he came to me at home, like, with these two huge bags fully filled with peppers. He said, like, my freezer are totally stuffed. I have no idea what to do with it. Can you do something with it? So he said, like, yeah, bring them over. I'll make some sambal with it. And okay, I made a bunch of like jars with sambal. I said, okay, you have some, I'll have some. And next week he came to me with this envelope of money. He said, here, there you go. I said, why? He said, yeah, well, I sold them because people really loved it.
Oh shit.
Yeah, yeah. I said, okay, really? That's yeah, yeah. And he said, well, actually, I'm thinking actually of expanding. He said, because my garden is a little bit too small for me, and this, believe me, this guy's ADHD as hell, so he always needs to be busy. So he eventually rented this greenhouse, and then it from like 5 plants, eventually it came to like 600 plants. And
600.
then yeah, well, there you go. And then eventually we started to make our own hot sauces as well, and that's where it started to roll actually.
Nice. That's crazy.
Yeah,
That's
actually,
very
a funny thing is that I just came back from Roadburn Festival, and that's happening right now in Tilburg. And we just delivered hot sauces at the festival at food stands as well. So
dang, they must be enjoying it. That sounds amazing though.
yeah, it's really cool to do it. So like, and we still have a lot of crazy ideas. Like we also want to expand our beer line because we once also did spicy beer. We're also
That's
going to do
crazy.
like the spicy honey, spicy chocolate, stuff like that. We're all working on that.
One of my questions is gonna be, what's something that like your fans would not expect out of you outside of playing bass, but you do beers, you do the hot sauces, you do yoga.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, and also like I'm also pretty much into art and stuff like that. And recently I also started to like well some of the people know that I used to work as a teacher at a metal factory, but now I also started actually managing some of those bands that got formed over there. So
That's
I'm
crazy.
also thinking of like starting my own management agency as well.
You should. That'd be cool.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Yeah, I mean, so far things are turning out pretty okay, and perhaps that's
Right.
going to be something very serious because we also do a lot of management ourselves in the band as well. I mean, we do have a general manager, but we do a lot of the stuff by ourselves. Don't just only make music; it's like really running a company.
That's how it is as a musician, and a lot of
Right.
people don't get there. You could have a manager, but all in all, you're still kind of managing yourself. And what's
Yeah.
cool is you know the industry, so you can help out a lot of bands. To be honest, you have the expertise. You know.
Right. Right. Exactly. And that's what I also noticed with some of the bands that I'm helping out right now is that you can help them like avoid making the mistakes that we made when we were
Right.
like kids.
Right. And then one of my last questions will be is you've already accomplished a lot in your career. What else do you have on your bucket list?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Of course, continuing what we're doing, but what is really on my bucket list at the moment, and perhaps that will happen one day, is actually the reason why we. I mean, if you know the backstory of A Spiral, our latest album,
Mhm.
is that the title track is based on the sculpture A Spiral by Stanislav Shukalski. So it's basically a soundtrack to that sculpture. And what I really would like to do one day is make a whole album with soundtracks for more of a sculpture, so it becomes like a whole collection.
That'd be really cool, actually.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's really on my list. I have no idea when I ever get the time for it, but I mean, I started with that song. That was one of the first concepts, and it eventually became an Epica song.
Dang.
Yeah, not almost accidentally, basically.
That just means more touring and figuring out more sculptures to write about, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And of course, musically, I mean, my taste is all over the place. I mean, I'm also a big fan of like classic rock. I mean, that's the stuff that I
Or
was raised with. I would really one day would like to go like for really like heavy, like really rock and roll bands. Go back to my roots, do stuff like that. And that's absolutely not for the money, just for the sake of doing that for
yeah,
fun, you know.
of course. And you're talking about being a fan of that. How does your playlist differ from day to day from to touring?
Oh, phew, it really differs from day to day because it depends also on what I'm doing. I can tell you, like my playlist when we, for instance, right before the writing camp, it was really like from John Carpenter to Sleep Token,
Interesting.
from Hans Zimmer to let's say Mick Gordon, who did the Doom soundtrack, stuff like that. It's all over the place, you know.
Crazy.
It
That's
also kind of depends on what I'm doing. And at the moment, like lately, I've been kind of rediscovering Motorhead again.
that must be interesting, like to go back like that far back, because everyone starts with Motorhead if you're if you're a heavy metal fan, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's, now we also shared the stage with Motorhead many times. Because funny enough, Lemmy was actually a very big fan of bands like Epica and Elaine and Nitrous and such. He really was. He was always like, I remember when we would be playing at festivals, he was always on stage watching the show.
That's so cool though. Man,
Yeah,
that's a
yeah,
hell of a moment.
yeah. That's at first I didn't believe it. Was like, yeah, sure, yeah, right. But then he was like, once after a show, he said like, hey, come over here. I want to have a chat with you. And I was like, okay, sure. I said, yeah, man, I really like your show. Yeah, can I have an album? Really? Yeah, sure. Here you go. I said, well, here's a Motorhead shirt, cool,
Oh
whatever. And
shit.
then I got kind of in touch with him, and then I really found out that it was really sincere. That he really, yeah, really liked that type of music. To be honest, even though a lot of people in the metal scene were always like, oh, that's not metal, that's way too soft and shit like that.
That's
But
stupid
it's
to
funny
say.
to hear that from like the ultimate like heavy rock god, like Lemmy himself, that he was actually used to be a huge fan.
I I'm not gonna lie, like it's not I don't turn on Epica every day of my life and listen to them like I do to
Neither do
like
I.
some, but all in all, like it's some of the most creative music out there. If people
Yeah.
can't understand that, and there's so many, it's not metal, it's soft metal. How is it soft metal? Listen to this new record. Like
Mhm.
honestly, there's hard vocal, there's not all just clean singing. I don't know.
No,
Maybe
no, exactly. And if
people
you
don't
listen
get
to
that.
like, yeah, exactly. I totally agree. Like, I'll be very honest. This is a genre that I kind of like grew into because back in the days, I was also not really a fan, but eventually I kind of ended up like playing Fritz for Delane as a session musician. And then I found out like, okay, there are two different experiences, like listening to music and playing music. There's music that I love listening to, but I hate playing. And there's music that I'm not necessarily a fan of listening to, but I love playing.
Right.
Funny example, for instance, I found it out when I was studying music. One day I had they needed a substitute bass player for a ska band, and
Oh shit.
I fucking used to hate that. I couldn't listen to it,
Right.
and then I started playing it. And as a bass player, it's so
It's
cool to play
interesting.
it. It's
Right.
very interesting to play that. And then I started to respect that music way more. And that's
Of
the
course.
same thing with this genre as well. Like I remember when that whole thing became a kind of a, I don't know, it's that whole genre came up like with bands like Evanescence and The Gathering with implementation like in the late '90s. Back then, I didn't understand it. I'll be very honest about that.
Right.
I was like, that's not my cup of tea. I was way more into like heavy prog metal and stuff like that.
Right.
And but later on, when I got those gigs and I started playing, it was like, hey, this is pretty fun to play and
Right.
also really fun to compose as well. So I really got way more respect for all of those bands, and that really changed my whole mindset about like how to listen to music. I mean, there's a lot of music out there, also pop music that first doesn't appeal to you, but once you start
Mhm.
analyzing it and you get into it, you get way more respect for it.
Of
That's
course.
that's the same thing when you say like when people say like, oh, hip hop, that's crap music. No, that's bullshit. That's
That's
like
some
how
fun
can
music.
yeah, exactly. How can you have like a full judgment about like a certain genre? I
Mhm.
mean, let's be honest, even in metal, to be honest, 90% of metal out there is crap. And there are a lot of cool bands out there, a lot of great bands out there,
Yeah,
but let's be honest, that goes for any genre. There's a lot
that's
of good
how it
things.
works. That's how it works. It's
Exactly. I mean, sometimes I try to kind of switch off that whole thinking in genres and thinking in boxes. I know that's pretty difficult, but at the same time, yeah, it really opens your mind. For some people, it's also like that. It's also their strength when they think like in boxes. Fine, I respect that. But at the same time, music can be so much more fun if you just open your eyes.
I agree. I agree all the way. And okay, so I have like two more questions, and I'll leave you alone.
Oh, it's okay.
So I randomly came up with this one. I thought so. You're talking about going back and revisiting Motorhead. Is there any albums you didn't like back then that you revisited now that you actually super like that you didn't like when you were growing up?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it happens with a lot of those classic bands that I mean, you always kind of are raised with the typical classics that are
Mhm.
considered like, especially by the purists, as those are like the typical albums. Like let's say, especially in Motorhead, I mean, if you look at albums like Overkill, Bomber, Ace
Right.
of Spades, of course, those are like the classics. But like recently, I totally rediscovered Another Perfect Day with
That's actually
Robbo on guitar. And what I like about that is like a lot. I remember like there are also a lot of band members, or a lot of fans, sorry, that actually hate that album because it
good.
was
Right.
new with Robbo on guitar. But at the same time, you can really hear that Motorhead mixed with a little bit of Thin Lizzy in it, and I really love that.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, so I
That's
really like that album. That's one of it that I really like way more than I used to love. But
right.
also some other like later albums, like like Sacrifice or We Are Motorhead, like the later stuff. That's yeah, I have so much more respect for that now. Like back in
Right.
the day, it was like I remember that those albums were released, and I didn't really care about that because it was like considered the newer stuff. But now it's like already pretty old if you think about it.
Of course. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And final question, where can everyone keep up with you and buy this fantastic new record?
So where they can buy it, well, of course, they can go to our website, and there are many cool web shops over there that you can find. Doesn't matter where you live, you'll probably find a web shop that fits to your country. There
Right.
you can get it. Please do, because it also help us also keep us in the charts as well. So go check it out. Of course, you can also check it out on all the DSPs as well. But if you haven't checked it out, please check it out, and I really appreciate that. And
Right.
enjoy, of course.
Right. Perfect. And I love to thank you for taking so much time to be on the show, man.
No problem. It's, once we start talking about interesting stuff, I start rambling. I know.
It's I do the same thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
but that's a good sign.
I'm gonna end the interview real